Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Kris Longston.
Thank you very much. I'm going to try and do something very difficult tonight, and that's to talk about land use planning in a dark cave and try and keep you awake for about 30 minutes. But I think it's very possible, and I'll do my best to do that. What I'm going to do tonight is try and paint you a picture and tell you a story, very brief, about what land use planning is, and in the Sudbury context, where have we been, why we got to where we are, and where we're going in the future. Because land use planning is really about identifying trends and figuring out why things happen the way they do, and then looking at what's coming down the pipe and try to make changes in policy to accommodate that change with as little hardship as possible as it progresses. After I've done that, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what the city is currently doing right now in terms of planning for an aging population, and then we'll have some final thoughts. So planning is essentially about bringing the big to the small, and we heard previously about some world trends that are going on, and planning is really about taking broad global issues and narrowing it down to the point where you're at a provincial level, where you're at a municipal level, and all the way down to city and even a neighborhood level. So planning goes from the big to the small. And when we talk about an aging population in this presentation, we'll look at what that means on a city-wide level, but also what that means on a neighborhood and even a property level as well. Just really briefly, this is the guts of planning in Ontario, and it's not very exciting, but essentially planning in Ontario is governed by the Planning Act and the provincial policy statement. And what that means in a nutshell is that planning is the same all across Ontario. A rezoning in Toronto means the same thing as a rezoning in Sudbury as it means a rezoning in Thunder Bay. And the province puts out certain directives in the provincial policy statement that your municipal official plans need to be consistent with. So there are aspects of housing issues that are in the provincial policy statement, and the City of Sudbury's official plan is consistent with those. And when you're at the official plan level, you're looking at broader concepts about housing, how neighborhoods should look, how transportation should come together, how the built form should look, and the way you implement that is through the zoning bylaw. And the zoning bylaw drills down to even the property level at how wide your driveway has to be, how close your building can be to your neighbors, and that sort of thing. So that's how, when we talk about land use planning, it flows. It flows from a real top-down approach from the province, but you do have leeway in your official plan to do things that make sense for your municipality, because obviously the geography in Ontario is so varied that they can't all be the same. So you do have some flexibility in the official plan. So land use planning, like I said, is going to tell you a little bit of the story. It's about context. And so the City of Greater Sudbury, from a political standpoint, is fairly new. It was amalgamated in January of 2001, and it consists of former 7 area municipalities and the former regional municipality. Some of the work that we've done over the last decade or so went to consolidate all the former official plans into one, and we've recently come up with one new zoning bylaw for the entire city. So it is fairly new politically, but that's about the only thing that's really new about it. This is probably the most important, one of these 2 next slides are probably the most important slides I'm going to show you when dealing with some of the issues that Sudbury has in terms of planning, not only for an aging population, but for service delivery in general. This is, this outline here in green is the geographic boundaries of the City of Greater Sudbury. Within that geographic boundary, and this is to scale, you could fit Toronto, Mississauga, Burlington, Oshawa, pretty much all of the GTA within the boundaries of the City of Greater Sudbury. So the geography is massive. It's the size of Southern Ontario. And when you talk about service delivery, anything from transit to sewers to social programs to recreation programs, the key to all of those is density. It's key to have a lot of people in a close proximity to each other. And you can see that when compared to Toronto, which has about 4,000 people per square kilometer, Sudbury's looking at just under 50 people per square kilometer. So service delivery in a city this size is very challenging. And when you talk about issues with an aging population, mobility is a prime example. You're dealing with a huge area that presents some really unique challenges. Here's another classic example of this again. So here you have the geographic boundaries of the City of Greater Sudbury. And here in the purple is the City of Toronto. So just to give you some context, if you are a senior living in the back where some of the more affordable housing, residential housing is, and you need to get to your doctor or the hospital or anything like that in Sudbury, you're basically traveling totally across the city of Toronto to get there. So the traveling distances within this community are enormous. And if you're trying to do any service delivery, or have a public service worker come out to a house, and you've got a patient in the back, you've got someone in Naughton, Lively, Cabriel, getting around to those areas is very difficult. And also, as people age and mobility becomes an issue, how do you get around to do the things you need to do? Because on a city of this scale, really the only realistic means of transportation is a personal vehicle. I mean, transit, sure we do have transit here, but realistically, if you want to get from Levac to Whitefish in any reasonable amount of time, chances are you're going to have to drive yourself. And what do you do later on when driving becomes an issue for you? So in terms of demographics, I'll just give you a little bit of history on the city of Sudbury. Our population is about 160,000. You see that we have a large Francophone population, and we are a population that's significantly bilingual, and we're an aging community as well. What does this mean from a planning for an aging population context? Is that what you have here in Greater Sudbury is you have what's kind of the de facto capital of Northern Ontario, where you've got a strong regional government or a government base. You've got a lot of hospital healthcare services here, and you've got a large French-speaking population. So what might attract some people from some of the outlying areas when they become as they age and want to be closer to certain amenities, is you might start to draw in people from the surrounding areas. So that's something to be cognizant of, just by how the city's positioned in northeastern Ontario. So in terms of community context, we originated with the railroad back in 1883, but soon after it became a mining town. Mining supply and services was still the major employer in the city, but we've diversified over the last 20 or 30 years or so, and now we're a major seat of government, of healthcare. We're basically one of the retail shopping destination for northeastern Ontario. We've got some of the big box stores in this area, so we are a major draw for this area. In terms of a population base, our seniors population is somewhat higher than the rest of Ontario. You're looking at about 16.5% of the population as of 2011 census is currently above the age of 65 or over. And that relates to about, just about 2% higher than Ontario and Canada. When it comes to people aged 85 plus, we are, about the same as the rest of Ontario and Canada at about 2%. So how do we stack up in terms of the rest of Ontario? You can see that Sudbury and pretty much all of Northern Ontario has a relatively higher seniors population as opposed to the rest of the province. So you can see that even though Greater Sudbury has a higher population of seniors than some of the Southern Ontario, we're still a little bit lower than some of our counterparts in Northern Ontario, the Soo, Thunder Bay. And you can see LA Lake, obviously their business plan is working great. They've got a seniors population up at about 40%, so whatever they're doing there is working very well. So that gives you a little bit of context of what we're dealing with. And then moving into land use planning is really about understanding change and looking at change and what's happened and projecting that forward and trying to figure out, okay, if we can anticipate what's going to change, how can we make things or anticipate that change and put policies in place that will make change less confrontational and less stressful in the future. So here's a good example of how Sudbury's changed. This is Elm Street, circa 1930s. Back then, Sudbury was actually one of the densest cities population-wise in all of Canada. That's changed quite a bit as the population grew more affluent, the vehicles became more prevalent, the city tended to spread out a bit. So we've lost that density that we once had. And you can see that also some things that were key parts of a public transportation system was showing high density. You've got a streetcar that used to actually exist in Sudbury. I had no idea that they existed in Sudbury until I actually joined our heritage panel. And so that's part of the public transportation in Sudbury back then. I think there was a streetcar, so that's changed quite a bit. This is a great slide to show how the city has changed. This is Paris Street, circa 1971. Two-lane cow path, pretty much. This is the intersection of Paris and Indian Road. And this is that same general area today. So you can see over the past 40 years, that road has gone from a 2-lane road to a 5-lane highway with multiple residential units on either side. It's probably one of the major thoroughfares in the city of Greater Sudbury right now. I want you to remember this slide because the first thing that pops in your mind is, well, the population's gone up, so it's necessitated this expansion. And keep that in mind as we move along through this presentation. Here's a great slide showing how the city's changed again in the south end. This is the Four Corners. That's where Grabs would be now. 4-way stop at the Four Corners. You imagine that now? I think I was looking at the traffic counts today. There's probably about 35,000 vehicles that move through that intersection on a daily basis now. And you can see how that area has developed significantly since that time. So, you've got the mall, you've got high density residential, some low density residential, commercial. That's all changed. And again, your initial thought would be that would be because of the population increase. Again, keep that in the back of your mind. So land use planning is about identifying trends, and I just want to go over some of the trends that we're seeing in the city of Greater Sudbury now as they relate to land use planning in an aging population. So right now, as we heard in our previous presentation, that this generation of seniors is much different. They're fitter, they're typically more affluent, and their lifestyles are generally more active than what we're used to. And what does that mean from a land use planning perspective? You got snowbirds. You got my parents, for example. My dad flew in from Florida today. He's been gone for 6 months. So you've got a portion of the population that's here for 6 months, gone for 6 months. So how do you plan for servicing that? You've got a lot of youth out migration that's happened. Not as much anymore, but that was still prevalent. Especially when I was going to university. A lot of my cohorts after leaving high school and going to university moved out to find opportunities elsewhere. So that's still an issue that we need to deal with here. You've got active lifestyles. So these seniors are demanding more recreational opportunities, more libraries, that kind of thing. So there's a lot of demand for that. And there's also smaller household sizes going on. So when back in the back then, they tend to be a lot smaller. What does that mean from a housing perspective? So remember I asked you to think about that slide I showed you about Four Corners? Here's the population in 1971 when that picture was taken, 170,000. Population today, 160,000. We've actually gone down by about 10,000 people since that. Sorry about that. We've actually gone down about, it shows how loud I was, and it took about 10 minutes for that to happen. So we've gone down about 10,000 people since that time, but still that growth has happened. So what is causing that? Why do we need to build bigger roads, more houses to accommodate less people? And that's a really interesting question. And you can see that Sudbury has traditionally had big fluctuations in population over the years, and that really has been tied to the ups and downs of the mining industry. So you can almost spot where kind of the recessions happened in the 80s, the 90s, and then the dot-com bust here in 2000. So you can really spot where when things go down here, there is an out-migration. So how do you plan for that? How do you plan for wild swings in population? Where Southern Ontario is just a constant kind of up, where in Sudbury it's a real roller coaster effect. So this is a really interesting slide because it tells you about what's happened in terms of what's been driving that growth in the city, even though the population hasn't been going up. Here you've got what the average number of people per household in 1971, when that photo was taken. It's about 4 people. So in every house you had about 4 people in it. And that has been constantly dropping as the population ages, divorces, all those things factor into less people per house. And on this slide here, it shows you how many new units have been built. So this is how many new dwelling units, apartments, houses have been built since 1971. So even though our population's gone down about 10,000 people, our demand's gone up because the household size has dropped considerably since that time. So fewer people per house means more houses. So we've actually added about 25 to 30,000 units since 1971, even though the population is fluctuating. So looking ahead, that's what part of land use planning is all about. So here we've got Sudbury's age structure, circa 2006, when the last census was taken. You can see that those boomers that we're talking about this is where the bulk of the population is here. In that time, it was about 40 to 65 or so. This is where the bulk of the people are. This is females on the right, males on the left. And you can see that 5 years later, as of the last census, that this has moved up. So now we've got the bulk of our population sitting here, and it's probably about 50 to 65, 70 range. So what does that mean in terms of housing demand? So back in 2006, when we were building a lot of single detached houses, that's what people wanted. They were in that time, they've got families, they want the space, they're able to maintain their homes. So that was really what was driving the housing market at the time, was that demographic. And you can see that demographic still, as people age a little bit more healthier, you can still stay in your house for a lot longer. So I mean, even this demographic here is still demanding that single detached house lifestyle, because that's what they've grown accustomed to. Now in terms of land use planning, fast forward 15 years to 2026, and what do we have? We've got the bulk of the population sitting up here, 65, 70 to 85-year-olds. So the question then becomes, if we're building all these single detached houses now, what are these people that own them when they're in their 70s going to do? And we really touched on that in the last presentation with, a lot of people are going to actually age in place. So what can you do to make those communities that are kind of spread out more accessible to people with mobility issues? And what's really interesting here is you see this demographic. So you can see up here that the females are really going to start outliving the males come 2026. So the question becomes is, what does a single female age 85 plus, what does that person demand in terms of housing, and what does that person demand in terms of services from the city? So again, looking forward into the future, the percentages of seniors is going to keep growing. Here we are in 2006, at about 15%. That's going to start growing quite a bit. So between the last census and now, grew about 1%, but you can see that starts to boom, 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 grow quite a bit. So by 2016, we should have 18%, moving our way towards about a quarter of the population come 2026, which really is only about 15 years from now. It's not that far away. So how is City of Greater Sudbury planning to meet the needs of an aging population? What we're doing is I'm going to show you 3 examples. There's a lot of things we're doing, but from a planning perspective, there's 3 main thrusts of how we're going to deal with an aging population. The first is ask yourself a question: what is going to be important to seniors in terms of the city? And I would say that these are the 2 most important things: housing and transportation mobility. Where are you going to live, and how are you going to get around when you're a senior in the City of Greater Sudbury? So those are the 2 I'd like to touch on as part of this presentation. The first tool that we have is what's called the official plan. You remember way back to that boring slide I mentioned where it showed how planning worked in the province of Ontario. This is the City of Greater Sudbury's official plan, and what that does is it basically lays out everything that you can think of. Like almost on your way over here, you drove on a road, those are touched on the City of Greater Sudbury. You're going to go back to your house, where you live, those living areas are dealt with in this official plan. So this plan contains policies for how the city is going to develop moving forward. And so in order to make sure that you've got what it takes to have the required housing for an aging population, you've got to make sure that you've got flexibility built into your official plan. The last official plans had really specific designations for living areas, meaning that this area could only be single detached, this area could be apartments, that kind of thing. We've moved away from that in the newest official plan to have one living area designation that allows for a range of housing types. And that's really key for an aging population, is to make sure that you can stay in your communities but have the choice of different housing types, not just single detached, but having apartments, semis, that kind of thing available in your community, so you don't have to move away from where your social supports are in order to get the housing that you need. Barrier-free housing is important, and we also deal with other types of housing like gardens and second suites. And then, not just from a housing perspective, but we also talk about things that make a city livable for people, not just seniors, but everybody. Urban streetscape design. So do people feel safe walking down the street? What do your parklands look like? Are they accessible for people with different requirements and needs? And then how do you make this all happen to implementation? So in terms of housing, which is the biggest issue for people, over the last 5 years, since 2007, we've built of all the housing units that have been built since 2007, 70% of them in the City of Greater Sudbury have been single detached homes. And this is typically the type of neighborhoods that you see are single detached homes, not really close to many amenities, and you've got wide lots, so mobility issues become an issue for an aging population. And I can make fun of this neighborhood because that's my house right there. and as I'm 37 years old, and I can't maintain this house. I'm not gonna lie to you. Our lawn was gorgeous when we moved in. Now you can see it's brown, and you can see our neighbors. They're all green. So, my wife's laughing that she doesn't know where the lawnmower is. when age or our ability to maintain a house becomes an issue, what do you do with these neighborhoods? And if you're going to own your house, maybe some options are other apartments in these houses or some other way of making these livable, or transportation some way. We got to look at ways to make the existing housing stock work for an aging population. Now, if you're talking about new housing types, we're seeing, I told you that we built about 70% of our housing was single detached. We're seeing a trend moving away from that, actually. What we're seeing are more condo type development, more apartment type developments being built. And what that is the market demanding a different type of housing unit. So this is a prime example of a new condominium development taking place in the South End. What you've got here are you have the ability as a person to move away from all the maintenance issues associated with your house, but still have the feeling that you're in a single detached kind of unit. And what happens here is you actually own the inside of your property, and you know, the maintenance and that is taken care of for you on the outside. So it's kind of a transition. You don't have to go all the way from, you know, your house to kind of an assisted living situation. There's all kinds of variables in between. And the important thing is to make sure that you allow for that to happen in your city. Again, here is another great example of a different type of living arrangement. What we call these in our official plan are garden suites. And what these are we allow for you to apply to get a temporary garden suite on your property. It could be a number of different examples, but here what we've got is a situation where someone's converted the garage on their property into a living unit for an elderly relative. And what that allows to happen is it allows your primary caregiver to live close by, but not, you know, in the same house. And you're allowed to kind of age in place again in your community, but your living needs a change. You don't need that big house anymore. You really just want to be close to your friends and family and neighbor, and you don't want all the maintenance issues. So what this allows you to do is kind of age in place and live close by. So this is a really great way of looking at, you know, the housing issue for a seniors population. And then, you know, as you move a bit further and progress a bit further, maybe you need to get into an assisted living situation. And here is an example of that being built in the city. This is the breezes off of Regent Street. So again, the key is to allow a broad range of housing types. In our official plan, this is a great example where we talked about how that boomers generation has been driving the built form in the city. Back when the boomers were children, all of a sudden you needed tons of schools in the city. So the schools were built at a record pace. The boomers have, you know, obviously graduated. There's a lot fewer children being born per family these days. So what's happened is that you've got these surplus school sites, and you see in the city there's all kinds of accommodation reviews going on right now to consolidate the schools because you've got a lot of school sites but not as many children. So what do you do with these sites? And our official plan allows for, has policies that allow for transitioning these surplus institutional buildings into a different use. So now the boomers that went to these schools, you know, when they were younger, now have the option of moving into them as a different built form. So this is that exact same school. And what's happened here is it's been renovated into apartments. So what's great about this type of built form is that it's very efficient because you know, the road's already there, the bus stop is already there, the sewer is already there. It's great from that standpoint, but it also allows people the opportunity to age in place. So if you lived in that neighborhood, you can now move over to this school. You know, you're still in your same neighborhood, you've got a different living arrangement, but you're still where you were originally. So this is a great adaptive reuse of that type of building. Now, this is really interesting because you hear a lot of conversations about, you know, what's a complete community, and, you know, how do you build a complete community that's walkable and all that kind of thing. And what I would challenge is that complete communities already exist in the city of Greater Sudbury. This is Regent Street. This is Bouchard here. And what you've got in this, you know, one block area are a variety of mixed uses and different types of housing development. So you could theoretically live your entire life in this community. You know, you could graduate from university, get your first job, you move into this apartment here. You know, you get married, you want to start a house, you can move over here. You know, you have a few kids, you need a bigger place, you can move over here. And all the while, you've got schools here, high school over here, you're close to public transit, your grocery stores are up the road. And you know, as you age, you can maybe move over to the apartment, and then you've got the breezes. So this is essentially a complete. I knew I'd get in trouble for that. She warned me, and I didn't listen. But what this is a complete community. And if you happen to be lucky enough to live in this neighborhood, you can eat breakfast at Gloria's restaurant every day. And I would do that if I lived there. for sure. But I mean, this is a great example of a complete community, and it already exists within the city of Greater Sudbury. And it's not just Sudbury where you can have complete communities. Again, I got razzed for being from Lively. Still don't, I don't care. I like being from Lively. What this is again, a complete community, but this isn't new. This was designed when the baby boomers were just being born. So, Lively is a planned community. It was a mining town from the early 50s, I think. And what you've got here, again, a complete walkable community. Different housing types, high density residential for people that need that type of accommodation, single detached, semi-detached, all in close proximity to stores, amenities, doctor's office, bank, beer store, very important. You've got the nurse practitioners clinic up here. And you've got your places of worship, all within walking distance. So again, another example of a complete community in Northern Ontario. And this is really what, when you're talking about aging, you should really, aging and mobility issues, this is what the type of community you need to strive for. A compact community that has a variety of different housing types in the community. So that was the official plan. The second tool that we've got in our arsenal, I guess you could call it at the city, are called community improvement plans. And what those are under the Planning Act, you have the ability to do almost like a really in-depth study of a neighborhood. And you can look at ways of improving it for environmental, social, community, or economic development purposes. There are a number of these plans that already exist in the city. And really what they're trying to do in a nutshell is to encourage mixed-use development. We've got a brownfield CIP that looks at old, sensitive environmental issues, looks at providing incentives to redevelop those for housing. We've got a town center community improvement plan that looks at doing building improvements in the outlying areas. There's community improvement plans for the West End, for Middle Lake, for the Flour Mill. There's a number of them. And what they do is they allow you to really focus in, have a good conversation with the community about what the issues are in that community and come up with ways to improve it. And it'll also allow the city to spend money to do those improvements. So these are really interesting tools that are at our disposal for improving the city. And again, they're not just for built form either, they can also be for recreational purposes. And one of the most famous CIP was the one that did the city's, the Ramsey Boardwalk. And to me, that's probably one of the best features of this city from a parks and recreation component. It's gorgeous. And anyone whenever I have visitors that come up here, I always take them to the Ramsey Lake Boardwalk because it's just an amazing experience to walk along the lake. Hanging over it at some point, it's just great. Getting into the third tool that we've got, so I talked a bit about how we plan for change, but we also need the ability to identify issues as they come up. There's some things that we may not have thought about right now, and so as a city, how do we tackle a new problem that comes our way? And one way we can do that is through our GIS capabilities at the city. GIS stands for Geographic Information Systems. What it is basically computer programs, computer mapping programs that have all kinds of different information on them. Census information, where the sewers are, where the buses go, where the lakes are, all types of different information. There's all layers and layers and layers in the system. So what it allows you to do is if you've got a question or a problem you need to answer, it allows you the ability to do that in a reasonable amount of time and fairly accurately. So what this is an example of, and just to show some of the capabilities the system has, is we wanted to figure out where most of the seniors were in the city of Greater Sudbury. So using 2011 census data, we were able to map where the highest concentration of senior citizens, people aged over 65, were in the city of Greater Sudbury. And zooming in a bit, we see that, and again, these are census tracts, so these blobs may not make a lot of sense, but this is kind of Kingsway here, LaSalle, Notre Dame. So you can see that there's a concentration here. Probably has a lot to do with Pioneer Manor being right about here. You can see that there's a concentration in the Flour Mill. There's a concentration here along Bethel Lake. St. Joe's is in there. There's a lot of high-density residential here, so there's a concentration here as well. And then you can see in the other older areas of the city where the seniors population is. And what it allows you to do is come up with interesting scenarios like where are all the grocery stores for these people? So as mobility becomes an issue, are these people located? Are food stores and amenities located close by to where these people are? So you can map those out on the map. Taking it a step further, we can look at where the people age 85 plus, and again, they're kind of in the same locations in this area of the city, here, here, and here. And where are the assisted living providers in relation to where those people are? Here, 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 here. Where are the retirement homes and where are the long-term care homes. So we can map all that out, and you can take this, maybe you use this to plan a bus route, maybe you use this to plan for service provision. You can do all kinds of different things with this. So essentially what I'm getting at here is that we've got hopefully the capability to answer questions that haven't even been asked yet. So what are the results in the city of Greater Sudbury? This is a little bit dated. This is about 2010 data. We've had a good mix of residential living environments over the last little while. So we've had 19 private seniors residents. We've had private retirement homes built. We also had 68 detached granny suites developed. That was at slide I showed you with the converted garage. So we feel we've been having some good results with the work we've been doing. There's also efforts that are taking place at the provincial level as well. This is Bill 140. Strong Communities through the Affordable Housing Act, and what this is going to do is require municipalities to establish policies that would allow second units. So this is a provincial initiative that is going to require municipalities to have policies that allow second units or apartments in single detached houses and semi-detached houses within the city. So that's something that's coming as well. And when we heard some of our previous speakers talk about affordability in housing, this would be a big step towards allowing people to age in place to allow for more affordable housing in the city. So this is a really interesting step that's being taken. I wanted to highlight the fact that I talked a bit about the official plan. We are in the process of reviewing it right now. We have to do that every 5 years. So if you're interested in adding to the discussion on the official plan or anything I've talked to you right now, you do have the opportunity to do that through our official plan review, again, which is taking place right now. And you can go onto our website and comment directly on the website about the official plan review. So this is really important because moving forward, we can do this every 5 years, and if there are issues that we need to address, we can do them now. So some really quick final thoughts. The biggest one I would draw your attention to would be density. When it comes to providing services from a land use planning perspective, density is really key. And when you talk about an aging population that needs different types of housing, that may have mobility issues in the future, proximity to services and amenities is crucial, and also proximity to different types of housing is crucial as well. So with that in mind, we will continue to take a holistic and flexible view through our official plan policies, and we'll use our tools when they make sense to do that. So that's the extent of my presentation.